In this video journal, I'll be going over the evidence-based practices from the IRIS module, and then the faces of autism as well. That was part of that module. So first, just talking about the evidence-based practices, they listed all 27 of them and gave a short definition that I thought was very helpful to individuals who didn't know those evidence-based practices or hadn't used them. They can also be helpful for a parent or guardian of an individual with autism who wants to know a little bit more about how their children are being serviced at school or in an outside agency. I'm familiar with 20 out of the 27 evidence-based practices as I've used them in my 6 years of teaching. I've always had students with autism as well as emotional disturbances, so I use a lot of these throughout my daily interventions and strategies and practices with kids. The ones that are new to me are technology-aided instruction, pivotal response training, discrete trial training, differential reinforcement of alternative, incompatible, or other behaviors, as well as cognitive behavioral interventions. And based on reading those definitions and doing some research, it seems like some of those I may have used and not realized that that's what I was doing just looking at those definitions. But I would like to know more about those because I think that evidence-based practices help all students, not just those with autism. And I feel like, again, based on my job in special education and serving students with emotional disturbance as well as autism, along with a laundry list of other labels, I've found them to be extremely useful in reshaping behavior and helping students succeed. So I would want to continue to learn all that I could about them to be able to implement them in my classroom and help those students. As far as the Faces of Autism page, I felt like it gave a short snippet of different faces of autism. So we know that autism spectrum disorder is a spectrum, and that while there are characteristics of autism, not every case of autism looks the same. And so there were snippets of using PECS, snippets of using social narratives. It also showed some characteristics. So where routines, they're strict on routines, and when those routines are adjusted or changed, that can cause a lot of frustration and behaviors that come from that. The social cues are difficult, and social expressions, facial expressions, are difficult for individuals with autism to read. And I think some of the things that really resonated with me and stuck out are making sure that you know your students. Ask your students what's helpful to them if they're able to communicate that, and if they're not, find a way to, whether that's through PECS or through functional communication training or what, that you're able to communicate wants and needs and desires. I think some of that behavior comes from a lack of being able to communicate, and I think that when you know your students, you're able to respond in the best way possible to them. They also mentioned preferred activities. I know in the last video the student was being taken away from a preferred activity of computer time, and so he was upset and wanted to leave the interview. So knowing those preferred activities, what will motivate your student, what do they want to work for, as well as making sure that if they've earned those, following through and giving them the time to be able to get them, earn them, and follow through with that. And I think one of the biggest things that resonated with me was the homeschool connection. So these things can be done at home, they can be done at school, they can be done in an outside agency, but I think whoever is involved with that student needs to be part of that team making those decisions, so that the team can agree upon how to best serve that student and then follow through with that. So consistency is super important, and providing the best possible way for our students to succeed. Thanks.